It so happened that I hadn't been to Temnovodsk for several years, although before, I used to come consistently once a year to visit my old folks, my grandma and grandpa. As luck would have it, it was them who raised me, not my parents. My father left for another country almost immediately after I was born, and a few years later, my mother found herself a new man who naturally had no interest in someone else's child. Fortunately, at that time, I was too little to realize the gravity of the whole situation. I loved spending time in the village with Ba and Ded, as I used to call them back then. At first, my mother only brought me to Temnovodsk for the summer, but when I turned 7, she said something like, "Look, son, you're big now, and you'll be better off with your grandparents," and all that. Of course, now I understand everything, but at that moment, it didn't upset me. On the contrary, I was just glad. After all, it was much better than the 5 of us living in a cramped 2-room apartment together with my new stepdad's nasty kids. How I hated them all and tried to mess with them at every opportunity. Yes, I admit, I was a disobedient and obnoxious child. I remember one day I threw my stepfather's things out the window. First it was his glasses, then some small things, and finally I found and threw out his wallet with money and documents inside. Oh, I caught so much hell for that, and I always fought his kids for real. Even though his sons were a couple of years older than me, it didn't scare me, and sometimes we staged a serious mortal combat. My mother would tell me, "Why do you keep picking on your brothers?" And I would answer that they weren't my brothers at all, just strange creeps. "And here is the main one," I would say, pointing a finger at my stepfather. Naturally, I got the belt for that and quieted down for a couple of days, but then it all started again. It's no wonder they decided to dump me in the village. In Temnovodsk, life was completely different, and I liked it much more. Ba and Ded lived in their own house and kept a small farm. Chickens, ducks, and a couple of pigs. They also had a garden. Ba spent most of her time there. I loved listening to her talk about seedlings, how to water cucumbers properly, how to treat the soil with fertilizers to get a good harvest. There were always fresh vegetables and fruits on our table. Ba grew not only the usual cucumbers and tomatoes, but also completely unusual varieties of some mandarins and lemons, wild strawberries, raspberries, and garden strawberries, all kinds of fragrant herbs, spices. And in the middle of the garden, like a giant, stood an apple tree of truly primeval proportions. The apples from it were always large and sweet. I really loved Grandma's apple jam back then. I remember I often pointed to some bush and asked, "Ba, what's this?" To which I always got an answer like, "And that's thyme, Deniska. I add it to meat. It will smell delicious. Want some soup in a few days?" Then I helped wash and chop everything, and cook it accordingly too. Closer to the evening, Dad would come home from work, and I don't remember a single day when he wasn't smiling. He always exuded a good mood, kindness, and confidence. When he had days off, we always headed either into the woods or to the lake to fish. Dad had an old Moskvich car and a real boat, which we used to row out to the middle of the lake to catch fish. Dad would tell me the difference between a carp and a bream, how to hook bait properly, which fish is better to catch with a worm, and which with breadcrumbs. After catching a few fish, we returned to the shore, where Ba was already waiting for us in an improvised camp. We would build a fire right there and fry the fish or cook fish soup. Those were the best moments of my life and my brightest memories. Slowly, year after year, life passed by. I started school, made new friends, helped around the house. I was just enjoying life. As for my mother, at first she came once every few months to check on me, but then those meetings became fewer and further between. Later, as it turned out, she had another baby, and all the attention shifted to him. Our usual communication dwindled to dry greetings on New Year's and birthdays, and after years, vanished altogether. I didn't regret it then, and I don't regret it now. My grandparents gave me more than they realized themselves. Thanks to their care, I grew up to be a thoughtful and smart kid, knew the value of work and rest, and could always stand up for myself. On the whole, I settled down quite well in life. After school, I got a tuition-free spot at the institute. True, I had to move to the city for this, but my grandparents approved of my decision and supported me in every way going forward. I was given a dorm room. Besides studying, I found a part-time job and sent part of the money to the old folks in Temnovodsk. Soon enough, I was promoted first to head of the department and then to deputy director. However, with the new position came an increase in both responsibility and workload, so I started visiting Temnovodsk less frequently, seeing my grandpa and grandma only during my vacation, which was once a year.
Over the years, it became hard for them to live in a private house, heating the stove, managing the household, and taking care of the animals. Therefore, they decided to sell their house and move into an apartment closer to the center of Temnovodsk. Besides, a minor earthquake that happened not far from them weakened their sense of protection and security. Of course, I added some money so they could buy a really good apartment with all the amenities right in the center. By that time, I was already a very successful branch director of my firm and had no issues with money. Even though Temnovodsk was considered an urban-type settlement, to me, it felt like a whole small town. In the center, there was a neighborhood of well-maintained Khrushchev-era apartment buildings with all utilities, mostly 5-story blocks, but there were 9-story ones too. Granted, there were only 4 of them, but it was the most elite housing in Temnovodsk, hills overgrown with dense forests. In the USSR, the Soviet elite used to vacation here, and there were plans to turn Temnovodsk into a fully fledged resort city. Fortunately, all the conditions for this were there. They even found a source of artesian waters, built a factory, and laid pipes to supply residents with clean water. But unfortunately, the higher party officials deemed the project to turn the settlement into a resort city unprofitable, and development practically stopped. Of course, the factory remained, and you might have even seen Temnovodskaya mineral water in your stores before. But now production has practically ground to a halt, and a bottle of Temnovodsk mineral water is hard to find even in Temnovodsk itself. Even from the tap, when I came to visit them in the apartment, I always drank only tap water. Grandma always said that, like, our water is the best thing in the world, it cures all diseases, and the good harvest comes from this water. I remember laughing and saying, "Bah, you should work in advertising. Not everyone can talk about water so appetizingly." To which I would receive a playful look of reproach in response. But unfortunately, even the best water cannot stop old age. I realized this during our last phone call, when instead of Grandpa's usual cheerful and deep bass, I heard an old, trembling, tired voice on the line. We talked as usual about this and that. I promised that I would definitely come. Deep down in my head, a bad thought flashed that perhaps this would be my last visit to the old folks. But I pulled myself together and set off for Temnovodsk the next morning. The town hadn't changed at all during my absence, except that there were much fewer pedestrians on the streets and fewer cars than before. I parked near some little shop, deciding to buy something tasty and please my grandparents a bit. But unfortunately, the choice of goods left much to be desired. The shelves in the shop were half empty. Lonely tin cans practically made up the entire assortment. Sighing in disappointment, I walked out of the shop, thinking I'd have to go empty-handed. But I didn't want to drive around town looking for a normal store either, so I headed straight to the familiar, slightly weathered 9-story building. Dad opened the door, and he looked terrible. Completely gaunt, very thin. Absolutely nothing was left of his former heroic grandeur. His sickly appearance spoke of the fact that his hour was already near, and my soul felt incredibly bitter and painful. After all, I could have come here more often and visited the dear old folks who raised me, but I had put work first, and now I bitterly regretted it. "You're finally here. Take off your coat. Come on in. Must be tired from the road. Go wash your hands and we'll have tea. And go say hello to your grandma. She missed you terribly." Dad sat back down and took a sip from his mug. Grandma went back to her room. I said loudly that I'd be back soon and stepped out of the apartment. I needed to gather my thoughts and get some fresh air. I stood near the entrance, smoked one cigarette, then immediately a second one. It became much easier, and I began to put my thoughts in order. Then I called a couple of the right people. With their help, I arranged a bus and spots in a good care home. All that was left was to wait for morning, and at dawn, we would leave this place. Of course, something like this could hardly be cured, but delaying the inevitable a little bit was still possible, and I would do it. From all these arrangements and negotiations, my mouth went dry and I wanted something to drink, so I headed to the very same shop I had entered earlier. "Got any mineral water?" I asked the sleepy clerk. He looked up from watching some TV show and slowly eyed me from head to toe. The clerk himself matched his dilapidated shop and looked very rumpled. "Only beer left," he mumbled. "Our own Temnovodsk brand." I sat down on a bench. Thankfully, the courtyard was completely empty. I opened the bottle and sniffed the drink. It faintly carried that same smell of stagnant water that was filled in the jars in the apartment, but I didn't care anymore. They must filter the water for beer better anyway, I thought, and took a big gulp. Despite a slight earthy aftertaste, the beer was excellent, moderately bitter, and I downed the first bottle in one go. I was just so incredibly thirsty, and after the second one, my soul felt noticeably lighter. Along with the drink, calmness and a sense of coziness crept into my soul. I desperately wanted more, so I returned to the shop. "Buddy, got any more beer?" I asked the clerk. He even seemed more presentable to me than a few minutes ago. I pulled out a 1,000 ruble note and handed it to him. He smiled and pulled 2 more bottles from under the counter. Thanking him, I returned to my cozy bench. I sat for a bit longer, drank it all down, and, already swaying slightly, headed back to the apartment. The beer made me intensely thirsty, very, very intensely. I didn't care anymore. At that moment, I would have drunk even from a puddle. From then on, everything happened as if in a dream. I walk into the apartment, and Grandma and Grandpa meet me at the doorstep, smiling. This time, their smiles aren't strained and tired, but sincere. Sparks are burning in their eyes. Maybe this water really is healing. Grandma hands me a jar, and without thinking, I greedily begin to drink the murky liquid. The smell is barely noticeable. Only a light, pleasant, earthy aftertaste is felt. I look at the old folks. They don't look withered. It's as if vigor and strength have returned to them. And in fact, there was no dementia at all. I just worked myself up over nothing. They are just the same as before, just like in my childhood. I take another sip, smile at them. They smile at me. I literally feel their thoughts, and they feel mine. How grateful I am to them, and how ashamed I am that I hadn't visited for 3 years. They understand everything. Dad places his hand on my shoulder, and I keep drinking, unable to quench my thirst. What delicious water. I feel its taste and see how the water is born in the depths of the earth. I am a stream flowing with a slow current. I am an underground lake. I pour into fresh rifts in the earth. I wash the bodies of the children of Katugva deep below. They are not dead, but they are not alive either. They give taste to this water, to this earth, to the deep, and they guard secrets. I am Ganaksa, the One, and we will one day dissolve in these waters, the dark waters. Grandma and Grandpa are smiling. They know everything. Now I know everything too. Everything will be fine. Finally, I am home. Subscribe to the channel and like it. I will try my best for you, and I promise that the next episode will be even scarier and more mysterious. Thank you.